Hello everyone, Conscientious Reaper here, and in today's video, I would just like to discuss some of my mistakes I made when I first set up a saltwater tank. I have a list of about 5 mistakes I would like to tell you guys about. A lot of people just like to talk about the goods and stuff and just show how good their tank is doing. And I know we all make mistakes, especially when I first got in the hobby. Heck, I'm still making mistakes, but I just want to tell you some of my mistakes. These mistakes are in no particular order. I got about 5 of them. So I guess let's get right into it. So the first mistake I made when setting up a reef tank, or I guess when maintaining it. So when I would get in the hobby, I would do research and watch a lot of people, and they would be like, you have to do weekly water changes every week. Do a water change. Everyone, like almost everyone, said that if you're a new reefer, especially, just do weekly water changes. And for the most part, that is true. But my first tank was a little 13-gallon, or it was either 13 or 14 gallons. It's some little glass box from Petco. It's not really cheap, nothing special. But I used to do a 5-gallon water change on that tank every week, which is just way too much. I mean, 5 gallons out of a 14-gallon tank every week. The tank was always too clean. My nutrients were almost zero, and I just couldn't figure out why because I was just so new. But it's so obvious, just doing too many water changes. I probably could have gotten away with every 3 or 4 weeks, but just everyone online said you got to do weekly water changes, and for that's great advice for most tanks. But that tank was just a little too small to be doing that many water changes on it. So I would say that's one of my first mistakes I made with that tank. Just I guess cleaning it too much. The water was too clean. Corals wouldn't grow as fast as they should have. But that's, I guess, mistake number one. Mistake number two that kind of leans off of mistake number one is I overstocked the tank a little bit. It was, I mean, not a little bit. I definitely overstocked the tank. It was a 14 gallon, and I had, at one point, I'm pretty sure I had over, no, I had 5 fish in that tank, which is just way too much for a 14-gallon tank. Way too much. And I just, because my thought process was, well, if my nutrients are too low, I should just add more fish. But the tank was still too overstocked. I didn't have a lot of aggression, but just looking back at old videos, the tank, too many fish. 5 fish in a 14-gallon is too much. And now that I realize that, but back then I didn't think anything of it. I'm like, oh, my nutrients are low. Let's put some more fish in. But that's kind of my second mistake. Not a huge mistake, but just a mistake nonetheless. My third mistake I would say I made was, I guess it's not a mistake that affected that tank, but it's affecting me later because I used in my main tank that you guys seen before, I used the same rock from my original tank, and coral placement I think I got wrong. And like I'll pop up some clips, but I have mushrooms going on my main rock structure, and I can't get rid of them. I got this really invasive orange montipora that I put on my main rock structure, and when I first put those corals in, they were in my original 14-gallon, and you just don't think anything of it, especially when you're new. But I definitely got some of the placement wrong with these corals, so that's just a little mistake, not as bad as the other ones, but just something to think about. My fourth mistake I would say I made was definitely having too fine of a sand bed. I'll pop up some videos of what the sand bed looked like. I don't know what grain it was. I just picked up a random bag with a probably just some fish that said it was reef sand, and just too fine. I couldn't turn up my power heads a whole lot because it would just swirl and make a huge sandstorm. But just too fine. That I learned from that mistake in my current tank. I have much bigger sand in there. I actually could never. One of the main problems with my original tank is I never could gravel vacuum it because every time I went to gravel vac, it would suck up the sand, and it just like I would just be like, just be a whole mess, sand in the bucket, just an ordeal. So I never gravel vac. So I still don't gravel vac in my main tank though, but I guess I've made a video on that you guys could check out if you were interested. But that's my fourth mistake. All right, and the final mistake I would say I made with this tank was actually when I first set it up. This was like the first big error I made, and I call it the baking soda incident. So when I first set up the tank, I got the salt water, I got the rock in it. I tested it, everything, and the pH was off, right? So I put some baking soda in there to try to raise up the pH, and I let it dissolve and everything, and I thought it was all good. And then, so I went out and I buy a clownfish, and I put him in the tank, and then it looked like there was some stuff on the glass, so I wiped down all the glass, and then the baking soda still wasn't all dissolved. It was all just on the glass. Like, the fish was fine when I first put it in. After I wiped down the glass, it started really going downhill. Yeah, and that was probably my just complete incompetency and idiocy by me. It's completely my fault. The clownfish actually did survive though. Well, I did an emergency water change, and the clownfish survived and lived a happy life until I got rid of him because he was a little too aggressive. Took him back to the fish store. But that's probably like one of the stupidest mistakes, just out of pure ignorancy. But those kind of my top five. I'm sure there's some more little ones, but those are kind of the main ones that come to mind with my first tank. I mean, I guess one more I could say is just I didn't test that much. I tested, but I just didn't test as much as I should have. So test your water, right? But that's kind of it for today's video. If you guys have made any of these mistakes or something similar, let me know in the comments. I want to see if I'm the only one who's made some of these. But that's it. I guess I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.